Hello, everybody, and welcome back here to the number one sports show. Today, we have our first ever podcast here on the channel as we will be going over our top 10 impact transfers heading into the next college football season with
Totally Team Man CFB.
as we will go ahead and get right into it here as we will go ahead and start off here today with Carson Beck. In my mind, maybe not the best quarterback in the portal, as some people say. I think there might be one name ahead of him. We'll be talking about him a little bit later. Transfer from Georgia to Miami, obviously struggled a lot this year, especially with interceptions. A lot of people thought he was going to be a Heisman finalist. Um, had about half as many interceptions that he did touchdowns, and then didn't never play in the playoffs due to that shoulder injury. But do you have any thoughts on Carson Beck here?
Yeah, I think Carson Beck is a very interesting transfer. He transferred to Miami. Miami did have a great quarterback in 2024 with Cam Ward. My question is, how will he replace Cam Ward? There's a lot of questions on Carson Beck's name. In 2023, a lot of people considered him a top quarterback.
Yeah, I
A lot
will
of
say.
people a lot of people looked at Carson Beck like the best returning quarterback in the nation up there with Quinn Ewers, but he definitely didn't perform to his full potential in 2024.
Yeah, I will say, as you know, they definitely did not perform to his whole potential there. Um,
I
one
don't know
other
if
thing.
that's fully his fault though. If you really look at it, like the weapons he had was not as good in 2024 as it was in 2023.
Yeah, I will say. He's probably regretting not staying at Georgia now, considering they already got Zachariah Branch. Um,
And Noah Thomas.
yeah. Um, Obviously, joining Miami, where Cam Ward will be leaving and going to the draft. Miami going 9-3 last year, I do believe, if I'm remembering correctly. With losses to Iowa State and a
They
few
went
others.
10-3, I believe. 10-3.
Um, but other than that, Carson Beck, very under the radar quarterback. Um,
I agree.
I will say the only regret Georgia fans are going to have is that they're going to have to sit there and watch them tear up these ACC defenses. Um, because I mean, anybody can really agree with that. The ACC defenses to the SEC are a whole different monster. Um, not to say that there's not a good defense in the ACC. There is. It's just that playing
Different
against
type
an
of
ACC
competition.
defense and an SEC defense, yes, they're both Division One, but it's a whole different level of skills when it comes to those two conferences.
Yeah, just how is he going to fit into that Shannon Dawson offensive system? I'm interested to see what he can do there because like a lot of people he was definitely a bit overrated heading into 2024, but I feel like we're backing off him too much and now he's underrated. You know where I'm coming from?
Yeah. Um, the only thing is, I will agree that he was overrated going into this season here a bit. Um, as the joke is, he has more leaked Snapchat photos and touchdowns. Um, Running joke nowadays. Um, Obviously now at Miami instead of Georgia though, so see if that joke still holds or not. Um, Depending on, I would really like to see a step up in his decision making this year, especially with all the interceptions he had last year. With I believe he had 11 or 12.
Yeah,
Um,
he was double digits for sure.
he had about half as many interceptions as he did touchdowns, which is not what you want to see out of a quarterback at all. Um, Most people had him as we were noting earlier, top five Heisman contender going into this past season, and just absolutely the wheels fell off after like week three. Um, he had his moments, but I expect him to have a breakout season with Miami this next year.
Yeah, I think a lot of the pressure is going to be off of his shoulders. People were expecting him to be like this elite quarterback for Georgia, but he didn't have the elite weapons to back him up. I don't know if he's necessarily going to have that. I don't know if they'll have that at Miami, I should say. But the defenses in the ACC, they're not that great either. So I don't know.
But we will go ahead and move on here to our next player, unless you have any last thoughts here on Carson Beck.
Not much to say. I think we said it all. Carson Beck's a very interesting quarterback. I think he's a bit underrated at this point. He's being disrespected, but I definitely don't think he's a top three quarterback in the nation or anything like that.
So our second player we have here is Eric Singleton Jr., transfer from Georgia Tech to Auburn here during the offseason. I believe he was one of the earlier notable players to enter the portal. Um, One of the most underrated players in America, in my opinion, at least. Um, can play wide receiver, can play running back, can do the whole thing. I mean, he they have him listed as a receiver, but he can run like a running back. He's like the Debo Samuel of college football almost.
Yeah, Eric Singleton Jr., like, he's a very interesting name. He doesn't have these crazy stats, but if you watch that kid play, he's a very talented receiver. He's also fast. And him transferring to Auburn is absolutely massive for Auburn. They lost Keandre Lambert Smith, and they really need some offensive playmakers. They got a young group of five-star receivers. So, like Eric Singleton Jr., being paired with those receivers, including five-star Cam Coleman, that's going to be dangerous. Those receivers, they're only going to get better. They can have a very good group of wide receivers in 2025 and moving forward.
Now, not to get off topic here, but with Auburn here, with all this stuff, the main issue for Auburn for over the years is they've had the talent. For example, Eric Singleton Jr. They've just never been able to get the talent to mesh together. It feels like these past few years. Obviously, somebody that we don't have on the list, Jackson Arnold, also going to Auburn here. That'll be interesting to see how Eric Singleton Jr.
They,
pairs with him as a wide
yeah, they
receiver
got a they
quarterback
they
duo.
got a quarterback battle going on there. They got Jackson Arnold, Deuce Knight, and who's the other guy they got? Ashton Daniels from Stanford. I
Yep.
don't really know who's going to start. We're expecting it to be Arnold, but I'm not sure.
I think to this point, it's pretty much down to Arnold and Daniels.
Yeah, it'll be
But
interesting to see.
um, other than that, I will say Eric Singleton Jr. Um, I believe he's a senior this year. Correct me on that if I'm wrong.
I'm really not sure. He's the number one receiver in the portal though, so like Auburn got a big pickup there.
He I honestly don't know, but we'll just go ahead and keep it from getting stale. Um, he is probably, I mean, he's a sophomore, so he'll be a junior next year. He had 754 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns. I expect those touchdowns to go up this next season. Um,
Yeah, Auburn, like they're going to be a very interesting team heading into next season. Well, it's not just the receiver position. Eric Singleton Jr. is a big addition, but if they can't get valuable play from that offensive line and the quarterback position, I don't know if they'll take that step forward. But they should definitely with how they are recruiting.
Keyword recruiting. That is the name of the game.
They have like
Um,
the sixth or seventh best class in 2025. They're really looking good towards the future.
I will, as you noted there, surprisingly, I wouldn't expect Auburn to be otherworldly this year, but 2, 3 years down the road, I could definitely see it. I could actually see him in the playoffs 2, 3 years down the road with this recruiting class.
Is this
Um,
crazy to say? But is what's their head coach's name? I totally forgot. But is he in the hot seat? Hugh Freeze, he's in the hot seat. Would you say he is?
with the way he's recruiting, no. With the way his team has played on the field, yes.
But I mean, look at Billy Napier. He was recruiting pretty well, but like he was in the hot seat heading into this season. Obviously, he overperformed the expectations, but that's an interesting conversation with Hugh Freeze. I certainly think he's in the hot seat.
If we see Freeze go 6-6 again, I think we're gonna and gets fired. Auburn's going to be back to square one, and I hate to say it, but if Freeze gets fired, I think we could have that Texas A&M situation at Auburn, with this top class that Auburn has here, even though Texas only had even though Texas A&M had the one overall class, to where all the Texas A&M players, half of them more from that number one overall recruiting class, mass exodus from that school.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. It's just like this is a team that should be pretty good. I'm saying like 8 to 10 wins if they really live up to their full potential next season.
So we will go ahead and move on to our third player on the list here. Do you have anything else on Singleton here before we wrap it up with him?
Nothing much to say. I think Eric Singleton Jr. is going to be a big contributor for Auburn, even more than Keandre Lambert-Smith was last season.
So our next player we got here is John Mateer, transfer from Washington State to Oklahoma. In my opinion, the best player in the portal, better than Carson Beck. That might be a bit of a hot take right there, but I do indeed think John
I agree
Mateer
with
will
you.
be better than Beck.
But the question is, how good is he going to be at Oklahoma if that offensive line can't do anything for him?
That is true, but obviously we have tons of offseason to go yet as well. So
I mean, on the other hand, he was an absolute baller for Washington State. They don't have this out of the world offensive line. He was super productive running the ball and passing the ball. So, like, if you really look at Oklahoma's quarterback play last season, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't good either. But like Jackson Arnold, he was more of the pocket passer, didn't roll out of the pocket much. Michael Hawkins Jr. was the scrambler. John Mateer
Mateer's
can
like
do a
the
little bit
mix.
of both of those things. He can be both of those players and even better.
I will say bit of a stretch here, bit of a hot take. But if Oklahoma has a decent offensive line next year, Mateer's going to be a Heisman finalist.
I can see it.
I mean, with how talented he is, and with being I can't talk with getting more recognition because him going to a bigger school. And if he performs like he did next year, not next year, last year, or performs even better, he could very easily be a Heisman finalist.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how much the offensive line makes a difference. The defensive line too, but like the offensive line, it doesn't matter how good of a quarterback you are. If you don't have a good offensive line, you're gonna look like trash. But like John Mateer, this Oklahoma team as a whole, like I really don't know what to expect from them. I don't think they're gonna take this big step forward. I think they'll be okay again. I don't have faith in that offensive line and that offense as a whole. I think John Mateer will be a better quarterback for them though.
Yeah, I do think we do see that Oklahoma offense take a step forward. If they don't take a step forward, I don't know what to say.
They got a brutal schedule again though. It's hard to predict a team to take this big of a step forward. Like I don't know. I don't know if what's their head coach's name?
Venables.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if Venables has it in him.
One thing I have heard, and this might be a first time hearing it for you, is Brett Venables. Don't get me wrong, great defensive mind. He used to be the defensive coordinator at Clemson.
And that's even if the defense can like stay consistent. They lost some pieces, didn't they? They lost some
Uh,
NFL talent.
yes, they did lose some NFL talent, but other things I'm hearing is potentially sending Venables to be Ohio State's DC, which could be a massive loss for Oklahoma, which means you're on another coaching search. Um, But if I am remembering correctly, they did just sign Venables to a multi-year deal just a little while ago, so I highly doubt that would happen.
I think he's not in the hot seat, but he's getting close to
He's
that.
on the warm seat.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for.
Um, but John Mateer, I mean, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Justin Fields in the sense of him being able to run it and pass it.
Well, I mean, he had like over 3,000 passing yards for Washington State. I mean, we didn't have expectations for Washington State, but like John Mateer was that whole team. He carried that offense. I know they had a good receiver too, but really, John Mateer really helped that offense out.
And if we're going to be honest, if I'm remembering correctly, it was Washington State versus Syracuse in that bowl game.
Yeah.
And I do not believe that John Mateer played in that game. Um, Correct me
Oh,
if
they
I'm
had
wrong.
that backup quarterback step up. I forgot his name. He had like a weird name. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was solid. He wasn't bad.
But I can guarantee you, if John Mateer plays, Washington State probably beats Syracuse.
Possibly.
But there's not a ton to say on John Mateer given the type of competition he has played. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not like a group of five quarterback coming to the Power Five. That would be a whole different story. But for me, it's more so questions about how will he perform against SEC talent versus Mountain West and lower Power Five talent.
Yeah, a lot of people. Another thing I guess we should mention, like Oklahoma, it wasn't just the offensive line. They had like their six, top seven, something like that, receivers out. It was atrocious. Like I don't know another word for it. Like they lost like all their top receivers, and I know they lost Nick Anderson to the transfer portal. That was a big loss. Do you know if they returned Deion Burks? I'm not sure about Burks.
I believe they lost him too.
Yeah, so like everybody's talking about all these receivers that are coming back that were injured, but I believe they lost most of their top receivers, and like I just I don't know how good they're gonna be. I don't know how talented that those receivers are, and I don't have much confidence in the offensive line. I mean, I don't have much confidence in the offensive line.
I'm trying to check here to see if they lost Deion Burks or not quick.
I'm not sure. I remember debating with somebody on my channel about
He will be
Oklahoma.
coming back to Oklahoma.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
So, do you have any final thoughts on Mateer here before you go ahead and move on to our first defensive player we have on
I
the
think
list?
he's got huge potential. He'll probably be a top 10 quarterback, maybe a sneaky Heisman finalist. But, like, again, I don't know about the defense. I think the defense will be good, but the defense, it's always possible for them to take a step back. And offensively, I'm not sure about the offensive line. And, like, I'm not sure about their head coach either. And their schedule is brutal. Like, the transition into the SEC, it's not going to be easy for them.
So we will go ahead and move on to number 4 on the list here with Patrick Payton, the edge rusher out from transferring from Florida State to LSU. In my mind, probably the biggest, most important pickup for absolutely any team out of the portal. May not be the highest ranked player in the portal, but this was, in my
Pair
opinion,
him with Harold Perkins.
I mean that's just, huh? Harold Perkins coming off one edge,
Yeah, he's
Patrick
back
Payton
for
coming off the other.
2025. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Imagine Harold Perkins coming off one edge, Patrick Payton coming off the other.
Yeah, LSU,
Or
And
quarterback.
Blake Baker. Blake Baker, his type of defense is aggressive. Like that LSU defense, I have high expectations for them.
I mean, don't get me wrong, as you mentioned there, Harold Perkins, the LSU defense has talent, but getting Patrick Payton takes this defense, especially that front seven, to a whole different level.
Yeah, I mean Patrick Payton, he's played multiple years at Florida State. He's been a big contributor for them. He's at 110 career tackles and 32 TFLs.
Um, Also to go along with, not the best season at Florida State last year. I think we had really high expectations for him going into this past season. Kind of like the same situation as Carson Beck, to where he maybe got a little overrated,
Yeah,
and
you
now
kind
I'm
of got to
starting to
give him
think
the
he's
benefit of the doubt,
underrated.
though. But that Florida State team was so bad. You got to give him the benefit of the doubt. Patrick Payton is a very good player.
If we see him come out and perform, I very well think we could see Patrick Payton a top 15, top 10 player in all of college football next season.
Possibly.
But definitely defensively, I think I do see him first team all defense SEC, or at least all second team, one of the two. I think that's a given, as long as he doesn't play like he did this year.
Yeah, I'm interested for the trajectory of this LSU defense. Like How are they going to look next season? They were okay in 2024. They weren't great, but it was definitely a step in the right direction. And like with Garrett Nussmeier back on offense and some of the pieces they're adding, this is certainly a playoff contender. They have some improving to do. They only won like 8 or 9 games in 2024, but they are trending in the right direction. And adding a guy like Patrick Payton on defense was massive for them to help the trajectory of that defense.
So, do you have any final thoughts on Patrick Payton here before we wrap Patrick Payton up?
Yeah, I think he's going to fit into that Blake Baker system on defense perfectly, and I think LSU. I don't have them in my playoffs, but like by the time preseason comes, if they continue to build a good portal class and look good heading into next season, I might put them in there.
So, number 5 on the list, we have foreshadowing, as you were talking about earlier, Nick Anderson, also another LSU commit. If I'm remembering correctly, he also went to LSU.
Yeah, LSU has the #1 class according to 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal.
Nick Anderson, not a huge wide receiver speed wise, but he is the type of wide receiver where he will go up and get your jump balls, one on one balls, those 50-50 type passes.
Yeah, they also got Barry and Brown. I mean, we're gonna mention Nick Anderson. We might as well mention Barry and Brown as well. He's not in this top 10, but Barry and Brown, they got that Kentucky transfer. He's like one of the fastest receivers in the game. So like the pair those two together, that could be a dangerous group of wide receivers. And like Anderson, he didn't play in 2024. It was a tough season. I believe he got injured. I don't think he played like at all in 2024. But in 2023, he had 800 yards and 10 touchdowns, and he was a very good playmaker.
And let's not forget in that 2023 season, too, he had that game winning catch against Texas in the Red River rivalry.
Yeah, I think he's ready to get back on that field. I think he's got that mentality. I think he's a very good playmaker, and like him making that move to go to LSU and be in that offensive system, I think it's great for him.
I have a question for you here about Nick Anderson. Want to hear your thoughts on it here. Do you think we see Nick Anderson in the Blitnikoff conversation by the end of the season?
I honestly can't answer that. I mean, there's so many great receivers, and like I have to do more research on the receivers, like how they're going to fit into these teams. But like Nick Anderson, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not even the best receiver on that LSU team because a guy like Barry and Brown, that guy's an absolute beast. He is fast.
But do you have any?
But if I was to give you an answer, I guess if I had to give you an answer, I'd say no.
I will say, Nick Anderson's like one of those receivers where he he will he has good high end speed, top end speed. It's just that he has good high end speed, top end speed, however many people call it. It's just it takes him a while to get to that top end speed with his longer strides.
Yeah.
And
So who else does LSU have coming back at receiver? I know they got Anderson and Brown out of the portal, and they had a
Brian Thomas,
pretty
I
decent.
believe.
Who?
Brian Thomas,
Brian Thomas.
that number 11.
Yeah, they lost the receiver from Liberty. What's his name? CJ Daniels. Is he returning or did they lose him?
Let's see. Let me check.
It's like this LSU team's looking very good heading into next season. The talent that they have, and like Brian Kelly as the head coach, I'm still up and down on Brian
Nope.
Kelly, but like a
He
lot of people,
transferred. Let's see.
he did
CJ
transfer
Daniels.
somewhere. I remember reading his name in the portal. I forgot where he transferred to.
I think he went from Liberty to LSU.
Yeah, he transferred there in 2024, but like 2025, heading into next season, I think he transferred somewhere else. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
He committed to Miami.
Oh yeah, that's right. So Carson Beck's got some weapons at Miami. They lost to Strepto. I think they lost Horton or one of their other top receivers too. But
They lost
Miami's got some
Restrepo and they lost
weapons.
Horton. And Damian Martinez.
Yeah.
But we'll go ahead and move on to number 6 on this list. It's not two, it is Damon Wilson, edge rusher, transferred to Mizzou, I do believe.
He's the number 2 player in 24/7 sports. Like, he's a 5-star.
Yeah, you want definition of domination? Just search Damian Wilson up.
Yeah, Damon Wilson, like, he's a highly coveted recruit. He contributed for Georgia pretty early. Like, he wasn't a monster for them, but, like, this guy has absolute talent. This guy has all the talent in the world. And he's taken his team to a and he's taken his talents to a Missouri defense that desperately needs him. Like, if Missouri, a lot of people are expecting Missouri to take steps back, the defense is kind of trending downhill. But like, if Damon Wilson can contribute to Missouri and make them an elite team on defense, make them better on defense, maybe Missouri can keep winning football games. If Damon
I
Wilson can be like one of those top players in the country.
I will say Damon Wilson, yes. I'm honestly kind of surprised he didn't commit to Ohio State. Obviously, that might sound a bit biased being an Ohio State fan, but he was pretty much down to Missouri and Ohio State, and he chose Missouri out of Ohio over Ohio State. And yes, I can understand that because Missouri is as a Southeastern Conference program for people who are wondering the elongated name of SEC. But I'm kind of surprised that he chose to go to Missouri over Ohio State.
Yeah, that's interesting because like Damon Wilson, we know he has the potential. If he's playing at Georgia early, like he's only in his like a first or second year of college. He's a freshman or sophomore. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I know he's early into his college career, but he's contributing at Georgia early. He's a highly talented player. So, like, he's going to contribute to Missouri, especially.
Yes, I do see him coming off the edge quite a bit. Um, he is the type of guy to where if he gets the right coaching and right development, he can be an absolute monster.
I mean, when you have the number 2 ranking in 24/7 sports, you know this guy has full potential for
I
the
mean,
transfer portal, at least. He was the number 2 player in 24/7 sports. I believe there's only an offensive tackle above him.
and not to add to that, but he was also a former 5-star recruit.
Yep.
If that tells you anything. Um, I wouldn't say he kind of reminds me of. I wouldn't say reminds me of, but he's like the new version of linebackers we see nowadays. Kind of maybe a little bit lacking for weight and height for today's linebacker, but when it comes to speed and athleticism, he knocks it out the park.
Yeah, Missouri, like that defense, they lost Blake Baker over a year ago. They took a step back in 2024. They really need a guy like Damon Wilson. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do for Missouri. I can't I can't really say how good he's going to be. I can't say if he's going to help elevate that Missouri defense and make them a title contender or anything like that, but he's definitely a big pickup for Missouri.
But now for number 7, we got Zachariah Branch, transfer from USC to Georgia.
I love this addition. Like
Fastest wide
Georgia,
receiver in the country.
honestly, I could put this like top 3 most impact transfers. Our top 10 is probably not perfect. We probably just pick some random names and
That's what
put
I
them
did. I
together.
just picked some and just put them in the top 10. They're just top 10.
These
So
might
be
not
it.
these might not be the actual top 10 impact transfers, but these all of these guys should be impactful. But if you want to talk about a guy that's going to impact a team so much, probably be like one of the top 3 most impactful transfers, it's going to be Zachariah Branch. Because if you look at Georgia, the one thing that held them back from being an elite SEC team, they were a good SEC team, don't get me wrong, but they were not elite in 2024. They did end up winning the SEC though. But like Zachariah Branch, this guy is going to be a monster for Georgia if they fully use him. Georgia will do everything in their power to use a guy like Zachariah Branch. They need that number one receiver who can do everything for them. He's a very talented receiver, and he's definitely ready to break through. In just 2 years at USC, he had over 800 yards, and he's very fast, like you said. And I am expecting a massive year for him at Georgia in year three. I'm very interested to see what he can do.
Yeah, I mean, electric on special teams as well. As you noted, they're very fast. Could work on his hands a little bit, in my opinion. Has been touch and go with his hands throughout the season at some points. That'll be something to keep an eye on. But he is another one of those guys to where, once again, if he gets the right coaching, he could very well be in the Heisman conversation.
And like Georgia, I believe they use their receivers a lot for like sweeps and runs sometimes. And like he can be that player. He can do everything at the scrimmage. He can do everything at scrimmage yards, I should say. And like also special teams, like Georgia wants a guy that can return a punt. Like you were saying, he's amazing at special teams.
Yeah, that's just the icing on the cake. I mean, this guy can be a receiver. He can probably honestly be a running back, really, if you needed him to be a running back. I mean, Debo Samuel. I mean, Eric Singleton Jr. I would say is closer to Debo Samuel than Zachariah Branch. But if you want a close second to a utility guy as you can get from Eric Singleton Jr. on this list, it's Zachariah Branch.
Yeah, and I mean they also got Zion Branch, Georgia did. I really don't know much about him, but like brothers being together, maybe that motivates Zachariah Branch even more. Zachariah Branch, like this guy, like I had so much hype. I mean, I had so much. What's it called? I had so much faith in him heading into 2024. I was expecting so much great things from him. He had a solid year, but like in 2 years at USC, he's only at 800 yards. He's underperformed, but we know the talent is there. He's been good, but I'm interested to see if he could take that next step and be elite.
In my opinion, this might be a stretch here. Obviously, you're talking about the Kentucky wide receiver earlier. In my opinion, Zachariah Branch is the greatest deep threat in all of college football right now.
That's interesting that you say that. And you were talking earlier about who was it? Nick Anderson being a Bolitnikoff finalist. I'm not sure about him, but Zachariah Branch, I wouldn't be surprised if he won the whole thing. He's going to be put into that offensive system with Bobo Thomas, and Kirby Smart needs that receiver. He is desperately putting all of his focus on getting that elite number one receiver.
Now, I know this might be a bit off topic here, but it kind of rounds around the portal as well. Speaking on the Bolitnikoff, since we also kind of ahead of schedule a little bit here, who do you have as your top five for the Bolitnikoff this year?
I mean, my list is not going to be perfect. I can't just give you all the names, but Zachariah Branch, I think, is going to be one of them. Evan Stewart, I think Evan Stewart at Oregon, he showed his potential in 2024. He was a very good receiver, but like his ability really got limited in my opinion. And like Jeremiah Smith, obviously. Now Jeremiah Smith's probably going to win the whole award. Who else? I mean Casey Concepcion. We'll get to him in a minute at Texas A&M. I mean that's a bit of a dark horse, but
My
who
my
do you think of?
my top five, obviously, I think the leader right now, it's not even close. It's got to be Jeremiah Smith. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it's
agree.
not
He's the leader.
even.
It's not close. But
Um,
Zachariah Branch is a guy that to watch out for.
yeah,
Someone that could
Zachariah Branch
possibly challenge him.
definitely.
If
Evan
Georgia
Stewart.
really uses his ability to the fullest, I think this guy could be a monster for them.
Yeah, I think Jeremiah Smith, Zachariah Branch, Evan Stewart. As you said, I don't think we got to see Evan Stewart's full skill set. Unfortunately, as kids say nowadays, did cook against Ohio State in the first game at least. Unfortunately, he was hurt in the second. Um,
I mean, I'm an Oregon fan myself. I know Oregon's got some absolute playmakers at wide receiver. Watch out for Jeremiah McClellan and like Ryan Wingo at Texas. There's some freshmen who could really step up and kind of be like Jeremiah Smith. Not as good as him, but like same story. A young freshman who steps up out of nowhere.
I'd also throw Casey Concepcion in there. And my
Yeah.
dark horse, I know this might shock some people. I'm going to go with Carnell Tate.
Carnell Tate.
That's going to be my dark horse. I think at Ohio State, obviously he's going to be a wide receiver one pretty much anywhere else in the country,
I feel like we're
except maybe
forgetting
two
someone.
schools.
Is there any other receivers that you can think of? Like,
No.
I could easily look it up right now and find out, but like I'm not doing that. I'm trying to think, but I don't know. Let's not worry about it.
So
But
we will
yeah,
go ahead.
Zachariah Branch.
I
Dude,
have Jeremiah Smith,
I'm so high on this guy.
Zachariah Branch, Evan Stewart, Casey Concepcion. No, wait. Yeah, I said Jeremiah Smith, Zachariah Branch, Evan Stewart, Casey Concepcion, and my dark horse is Carnell Tate.
Like you remember Georgia's offense in 2023, it was with Brock Bowers. Like they did not have elite playmakers at wide receiver. They had good playmakers at wide receiver, and it was enough for them. But like the guy that really helped elevate that offense was Brock Bowers. They need that guy on offense. It might not be a tight end, but Zachariah Branch could be that offensive playmaker for them.
Zachariah Branch is one of those guys where he's not as physical as Brock Bowers, but he is one of
No,
those
definitely.
guys to where he can use his
Think
speed
of
to get
Tez
open
Johnson at
whenever you
Oregon.
need him to get opened.
Tez Johnson at Oregon. He really helped elevate that offense. And when Tez Johnson got injured at Oregon, remember they nearly lost to Wisconsin.
And then he
I
was
mean,
banged
one
up
player
against
can make
Ohio
a
State
huge
as well,
difference
I
for a
believe so
team.
too.
Sorry, say that again.
I do believe he was banged up when Ohio State and Oregon played in Rose Bowl too, even though he played. But if I'm recalling correctly, he was not 100%.
I'm not sure. I mean, they didn't really say anything about it.
I know Evan Stewart was out,
Yeah, he was.
but we'll go ahead and move on to our next guy here. And at number 8, I got Max Clare, tight end out of Purdue, transferring to Ohio State, number 1 ranked tight end out of the transfer portal. A very underrated guy, in my opinion, just for the fact that obviously he's not going to get recognition because he was at Purdue. But now being able to get the recognition at Ohio State, this is definitely not even close. A huge improvement at tight end at Ohio State over G. Scott Jr. Now, don't get me wrong, G. Scott Jr. wasn't horrible, but he was more of a locker room leader, kind of a voice type of guy, more than an on the field guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Like these are one of the players. These are one of the players on here that I don't know much about and that I haven't looked into a lot. I haven't heard much about Max Clare. I do know. I think he is the top player in the transfer portal, but I didn't really know much about his name. Probably because he was at Purdue, but he was a very solid tight end for them. The more I look into him,
Yeah, not the quickest tight end. He's kind of reminds me, do I dare say it, Brock Bowers. Um, with the way he plays, maybe not as athletic as Brock Bowers, but definitely, kind of Brock Bowers ish. Um, more physical than Brock Bowers, I would definitely say. Um, has great hands, underrated speed. He's once again one of those types of guys to where, you let him get going and you will not stop him. He's
yeah,
one of
Max.
those
I mean,
players
Max.
to where you let him get ahead of steam and you're not going to get him down.
Yeah, sorry for trying to interrupt you,
Oh,
but
you're good.
Max Clare, he was a big positive for like one of the worst teams. I mean, Purdue, they were like they were the worst team in the Power Four. They only won one game. I mean, Florida State was pretty bad too. You could make a debate for them, but Purdue only won one game, and they went 0-9 in the Big Ten. Max Clare was one of the huge positives for this Purdue team. He had 685 yards and 4 touchdowns for them as a tight end.
Yeah.
Now, like he's taking his talents to the Buckeyes, Ohio State. I mean, that guy's going to contribute to them, no doubt about it.
I mean, obviously, not to boast about Ohio State here, but if you look at their offense this year, I know their offense is good every year, so you're probably like, why the heck are you saying this? But in my opinion, Max Clare takes this Ohio State offense to a whole different level. You
Yeah,
already
when's
got
the last
Jeremiah.
time Ohio State had like an elite tight end? I don't know if Max Clare can be that guy, but like, and you know Ohio
I
State football a lot. What was like the last elite Ohio State tight end?
I mean, I would say Cade Stover, but I wouldn't really
Oh
call him
yeah,
that
Cade Stover.
elite.
Yeah, Cade Stover was really good. Forgot
I
about him.
wouldn't necessarily call him elite though. Max Clare is going to be better than Cade Stover. I can tell you that right now.
You think so?
Oh, by far. Cade Stover was a farm boy, was raised in Ohio, and he was more of a physical guy. Cade Stover played linebacker before tight end. Um, but if you think about this, back to the days of C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields, Ohio State always had a reliable tight end. This year it was meh with G. Scott Jr. And also, don't forget about Jelani Thurman. He is a very under the radar tight end for Ohio State, in my opinion. I think he could take a big step forward this coming year. But if you just think about it, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis will probably replace Emeka Ibuka. Now you add Max Clare to that to give you an upgrade at the tight end position over G. Scott Jr.
And man, like Will Howard, I mean, he was a good quarterback for Ohio State. I think he was a bit better than people expected. I think he was a little bit underrated and not appreciated enough. But like, we know he's not this super talented quarterback, but they have multiple 5 stars on that roster who could really step up for them.
And if you think about it, now you're going to have Julian Sayin at quarterback.
I mean, maybe. I mean, probably, but like, we don't know for sure. Tavion St. Clark, and who's the other guy they have?
It's not to be
Or
picky, but it's
Tavion St.
actually called
Clair.
Tavion St. Clair, just to throw that out
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
And Lincoln
My bad.
Keenholz. Um,
Thinking Keynotes. It will probably be Julian saying you're right, but like we don't know for sure.
from what I heard, it's down to St. Clair and saying Keenholz is probably going to hit the portal. Um, but we will go ahead and move on to 9 now, unless you have any can talk final thoughts on Max Clare here.
Not much to say about Max Clare. I wish I had more to say, but I honestly don't know much about the guy.
So number 9, we have Casey Concepcion. My opinion, the most underrated receiver in all football, college
Oh,
football.
people are forgetting about him. Do you remember what he did his freshman year?
Yep. I mean, I believe he's I want to say junior this coming season. Um,
Uh, well, he's played 2 years of college ball. I mean, I don't know how the eligibility works sometimes. Sometimes a third-year player is a sophomore. Doesn't make sense to me sometimes. But
get
I
a
know
red
he's
shirt.
going into his third year.
But
I believe he
Concepcion,
played both seasons, so he should be a junior.
um, very underrated in my
I
opinion. Now
agree.
going to Texas A&M. By far the most underrated wide receiver in the country, maybe outside of Zachariah Branch, depending on how he plays this year at Georgia.
Look, I think Georgia, like same thing we said about Georgia, maybe not to the same extent, but like Casey Concepcion, he could be the Tez Johnson to that offense and completely elevate that Texas A&M offense because they have not had any great receivers over the last couple of years.
Now, I got a question for you quick here. Bringing up Zachariah Branch and Eric
Zachariah
Singleton
Branch
Jr.
and Eric Singleton Jr.
Who, in your mind, was the biggest impact transfer wide receiver out of those three guys?
between Casey Concepcion, Zach Branch, and Eric Singleton Jr.
Yep.
Well, I think Auburn. I think what's his name? Eric Singleton Jr. I think he's going to be a great receiver for them. Probably be one of the top two leaders, maybe the leading receiver. But like Zachariah Branch, this guy Georgia desperately needs him. Like to help elevate their quarterbacks and to help keep that offense playing and living up to its standard in that Mike Bobo system. And they need that elite receiver, and I think Zach Branch can be that guy. So I really think it's going to be Zachariah Branch who is the biggest impact, and I mean, I might say it, maybe the biggest impact player in the transfer portal. I'm really high in him. I'm expecting him to have a big year.
Yeah, I do expect Zachariah Branch to have a 1,000+ receiving yard season this year, along with Casey Concepcion.
Yeah,
Um,
let's talk about Casey Concepcion.
not as fast as Zachariah Branch, but still very explosive. Um, maybe won't play necessarily as much dividends, especially in the special teams role. But great route runner. Definitely a better route runner than Zachariah Branch, in my opinion. That is the one downside Zachariah Branch's route running. But back to Casey Concepcion here. Um, other than that, I don't really have a ton to say on Casey Concepcion,
Yeah. I,
except that he is probably the most underrated player in this portal outside of maybe two other players.
yeah, Casey Concepcion. I mean, Texas A&M, like I said, they need that elite playmaker. I mean, Concepcion might be that guy. He might be that guy. I'm not sure. He took a bit of a step back in 2024. But if you remember that freshman season, he had over 1,000 all purpose yards, scrimmage yards. He was a monster for NC State. I believe he was an All American, an ACC All American. And just his, I mean, and it's just his first 2 years at NC State, he had 1,600. He had over. Wait, let me read this number: 1,655 scrimmage yards and 18 touchdowns. And it's not just him though. You pair him with Micah Hudson, the young, talented five-star freshman receiver that they have. Texas A&M could be elevated on offense, and I think Casey Concepcion could be one of those top receivers for them.
So, do you have any final thoughts on Concepcion here before we go ahead and move on?
I mean, I think we said it. I think Casey Concepcion. I mean, Texas A&M. They need to take that step forward. The offense needs work. They were okay on offense and defense in 2024, but they had their ups and downs. They had their bad moments on offense and defense. I wouldn't say they were very good on either side of the ball. So
So,
I'm interested to see how Casey Concepcion can work in that offensive system.
our final player here, I know we were just talking about changing it there last second, but we're going to stick with it, and that is Justice Haynes, running back transferring from Alabama to Michigan. Obviously, filling a pretty big hole, in my opinion, that Diamond Edwards will be leaving.
Also, Kalel Mullins. Kalel Mullins, he was their top running back, I believe.
Yes. Justice Haynes, my opinion, most underrated running back in the SEC this year by a pretty large amount, in my opinion. More explosive than people give him credit for.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this guy. I mean, you talk about a guy that is fit for that Michigan grounded pound offensive system, the way they play football. This Justice Haynes, like you said, people don't give him enough credit for how explosive he is, but more of his game is grounded pound. He's a strong guy, and like he will fit perfectly into that Michigan offense and what they do. And he's also Justice Haynes. He didn't really have that breakthrough year for Alabama. People were expecting him to be a monster for them, Alabama. They were okay with him. I mean, I don't know what I'm saying. Justice Haynes was a pretty good quarterback for them. He's a former five-star quarterback or former five-star running back. I mean, he's replacing Edwards and Mullins, two running backs who really contributed to Michigan in 2024. And I do believe he was limited to his abilities at Bama. He didn't really show his full potential at Alabama. So I think he's going to be a beast for Michigan. I have high expectations for this guy.
Yeah, I will say I do think he definitely got overshadowed at Alabama by guys like Jalen Milrow and Ryan Williams, etc. But now being at Michigan, to where you're going to either have Bryce Underwood, or somebody else starting, and not really a wide receiver to count on with Colston Loveland leaving. There's really no one, no shadow for him to hide in. To where I think we are definitely going to see him take a notable step forward this year.
Yeah, Justice Haynes, I don't know much about that Michigan running back room, but Michigan lost their top two running backs in Edwards and Mullins. That's going to be tough to replace. But I think Justice Haynes will clear both of them. I think Justice Haynes will be a better running back than both Edwards and Mullins. What do you think about that?
I do agree with you on that. I think Edwards is a bottle lightning type of running back.
I think
Um,
this guy's got massive potential. He's one of those running backs that I'm just very looking forward to next season. You talk about a guy that can break out. Justice Haynes is that guy.
yeah. Um, I really think when you look at it, is that Mullins is like Mullins. Excuse me,
Yeah,
that
he
Haynes
was.
is like Mullins and Edwards combined into one,
Yeah, that makes sense.
with more so the speed and elusiveness of Mullins and the power of Donovan Edwards. Except, do I dare say it that Hayes is more explosive and powerful than Donovan Edwards and Mullins?
I mean, Donovan Edwards. There is times where he looks super slow. I mean, he was a good running back. I mean, people clown on him a little bit too much. He wasn't that bad, but like he wasn't what people expected him to be. Myself, like I had him as a top 10 running back. He was not that.
So, wondering if you wanted to add um, one other thing here to the podcast here. Um,
We can add a little addition, a little honorable mention.
um, Little honorable mention, more so NFL related than anything. Just want to kind of bring it up, even though you're not a huge fan of NFL. Um, Even
Are you
though
talking? You're talking NFL.
it's just one little. It's you're probably aware of him because it's one of the biggest names in the NFL. Actually,
Gotcha.
um, I don't know if you heard this or not, but Miles Garrett has requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns.
Cleveland Browns. I know Miles Garrett. I mean, he's one of the top defensive ends in the NFL. I don't follow the NFL much, but so he's requested a trade to get traded away from the Browns.
Yes, his reason is he wants to win
I
because
mean,
the Browns
who
had
doesn't
three
want to
wins this
win?
year.
The Browns. I mean, what happened to them? They were like trending. They were trending uphill. They were like 0-16, I believe. Then they were taking steps forward. Didn't they make the playoffs one year or almost make
They
the
made the
playoffs? And now they
playoffs
just
two
fell
years.
apart
They made
again.
it in 2020. They made it last year, and then this last year, about little less than halfway through the season, Deshaun Watson ruptured his Achilles.
Dang. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that. I really don't follow the NFL much. To be honest, I don't think the passion in the NFL comes anywhere near as close to college football. College football, it still feels like they're playing for much bigger than themselves. Like in the NFL, sometimes it feels like there's no passion to the game and they're just playing for money.
I will say the one other thing is it feels like, obviously we don't have full blown proof that the NFL is scripted, but sometimes it just feels like watching the NFL legitimately feels scripted to where college
Bro,
football, you seriously don't know what's about to happen
bro,
next.
I hope college football doesn't go down that hill. But like I have faith that college football never gonna fall off because of the tradition and just the atmosphere of it and like all of the teams and it's amazing. But like the NFL, like these guys are just it's like I don't even know. I don't enjoy watching the NFL anymore. And
They're
like
just there for the money,
I
and that's
joke
it.
I was joking around a lot like before like with some of my friends and family. Like I joke about how the NFL is rigged, but I didn't actually believe it. But the more I hear about the NFL, the more I watch the NFL. Maybe it's not fully rigged, but sometimes I wonder if the refs are like actually like rigging games. I don't even know. I don't care though. I don't care enough to really pay attention to it. But like I just something's off about the NFL. It's just it doesn't compare to college football in my opinion.
But do you have any thoughts here before we go ahead and wrap this up about the 10 portal players we just went over?
Yeah, it was fun talking with you. I love talking about just college football in general and learning more. The more I talk about this, the more I learn. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, but I like talking about players because I learn more, and I'm interested to learn more with you whenever we do these more of these podcasts and just take notes and study these players and get ready for next season and get ready for the future and keep
So
learning
yeah,
college football. This is what I do. This is what you do. So let's keep doing our thing. It was fun.
yep. But that's all we have for you today, and that is our first episode of the podcast here on my end, at least. That'll be about the third, I believe, on your end. Um,
Sir.
but that is all we have for you guys. We hope you enjoyed the video if you're still here because this was a bit of a elongated video. But we'd like to thank all of you for watching, and we'll see you all next time.